Hey guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about imperialism in Africa and India today. So let's jump right into that. You should be taking notes with your pieces chart that you have on your assignment. So just remember as we're going through to be taking notes on all different parts, in all different boxes in there. Okay. All right. Your essential question for today, the main thing that we're getting at is what was the impact of European imperialism in Africa and India? So, what's the impact of European imperialism? And we've talked about what imperialism is in the last lesson. It's a building of empire in uh, in all over the world, mainly done by Europeans. So that's why we're talking about European imperialism here. Now, the United States does some imperialism too, as does Russia and Japan, which Russia is partially European. But we're going to focus on on the European countries today. Okay. All right. So from 1880 to 1914, European nations used imperialism to dominate the continent of Africa. So they take over all parts of Africa politically and economically, and bring all these countries into foreign rule. So we're going to talk about exactly how that happens. So let's go back a little bit into the arrival of Europeans in Africa in the first place. Before Europeans, Africa was divided into tribal clans. You can see all the different traditional ethnic boundaries of Africa right there. There's tons of ethnic boundaries you see there. There's tons of different ethnic groups, thousands of ethnic groups in Africa before Europeans arrive. Now, Europeans, there's also powerful Islamic kingdoms as well. We've talked about that before. How Islam spread in Africa, and they build these powerful kingdoms, these empires, like Ghana, Mali, Songhai, and but they're all over Africa, and these spread throughout as well. So you've got ethnic different a whole bunch of different ethnic groups, and then you have powerful Islamic kingdoms in addition to that. So during the age of exploration, Europeans explored the African coast. That was mainly done by Portugal. Um, so Portugal explores the African coast on the east, on the west, the south, and the east side of Africa, and that really gets Europeans involved. They build kind of frontier forts to trade, and that really starts to get Europeans involved in Africa and trading there. They also brought African slaves to their colonies in America. So part of that trade is the slave trade, where they trade weapons and other resources and they exchange those for African slaves, slaves that are taken due to war between African colonies. They these slaves are traded to the Europeans, and the Europeans then trade those slaves and bring them to their colonies in America. So the Industrial Revolution is what we talked about in the last unit. That leads to imperialism in Africa in the mid 1800s. So instead of these frontier trading forts and stuff like that, now we have true colonialism and imperialism in the mid 1800s that comes into Africa. So how does it happen? How is it connected to the Industrial Revolution? Let's talk a little bit about that. The first Europeans to explore the interior of Africa were actually missionaries and explorers, seeing what was there. The missionaries bringing bringing Christianity to to the inner parts of Africa that were unknown to Europeans at that time. Um, and in the 1870s, the discoveries of a missionary named David Livingstone increased European interest in Africa. So David Livingstone goes into Africa and writes back and about his discoveries there. Europeans want to be more involved in the interior portions of Africa, not just the exterior, coastal portions. There were reports of large deposits of natural resources. So the Europeans wanted that, and then also during this time, there's a rise of nationalism. We talked about that last unit in our revolutions unit. There's a rise in nationalism where people are proud of their nation and what's best for their nation, and there becomes a you start to identify based on the nation that you're a part of. And in Europe, this sets off a race for African colonies that they want to build their nation by getting as many colonies as possible and using those to control, to controlling the economies of these colonies and and using that to essentially better themselves. Uh, Other things that encourage the conquest of Africa are social Darwinisms, which we talked about a little bit last lesson. Social Darwinism is the idea of taking the ideas of Charles Darwin and the theory of natural selection, and kind of applying those to social or racial situations. In this case, where you this is the belief that that if it's kind of the survival of the fittest mentality, but applied to, okay, if Europeans take over Africa, then that just means that Europeans are destined to survive and destined to control, and it's all about the might makes right, that sort of thing. If we can take over Africa, then we will. And this idea that the idea of the white man's burden, that it's the job of whites to bring civilization, in the biggest quotes I can make, to African societies, and really all societies that are quote unquote not civilized or not part of European culture. There's a huge idea that they're doing good in the world by essentially conquering groups that that are unlike them. Steamboats also encourage the conquest of Africa because there are many rivers going through Africa that make and the steamboats make these rivers navigable to where you can get up and down them and trade up and down them. So that comes into play quite a bit. And then industrial weapons are a huge part of this as well. These industrial weapons that are created by the Europeans are extremely powerful and way more powerful than what the Africans themselves have. So that becomes a huge part of this encouragement of this conquest, because hey, we have more powerful weapons because we've industrialized, and these African nations have not, or African tribal groups or or empires have not industrialized, so we have that technological advantage over them. All right, the race for African colonies was so fierce that Europeans became afraid that wars would break out between European nations when they were trying to conquer. So in 1884, 14 nations met at the Congress of Berlin. It's also known as the Berlin Conference, to set the rules for colonizing in Africa. Okay, so they set the rules for colonizing to see, okay, what are the rules going to be so that we don't get into wars trying to get these African colonies. So pause this for a second and think, what kind of rules do you think they came up with? Try to come up with at least one thing that you think they came up with to try to set the rules here. So they decided that any nation could claim land in Africa, any European nation could claim land in Africa by notifying other nations, other European nations, again, and showing that it could control the area. So if you let people know, hey, this is our land, and you can militarily control it, and keep other, well, essentially keep the indigenous people under control, essentially, then you've proven that you can control the area, and you let everybody know, and then you can have that area. Now notice, no African nations were invited to attend the Berlin Conference. Nobody at all. This was all European nations deciding how Europe was going to kind of carve up Africa. Also, no concern was given to ethnic divisions in Africa. So those thousands of ethnic ethnic tribal states. Those are going to be, tribal clans. Sorry, are going to be um, those are going to just be all thrown together. Some of these tribal clans have been at war with each other for ages. So that is just asking for trouble, not considering these ethnic divisions in Africa and what throwing everybody into the same colony is going to do to the stability of the entire continent. So by 1914, Europeans controlled 90% of Africa. 90% of Africa is controlled uh, by by Europeans by 1914. Okay. Um, France took most of West Africa. Belgium claimed the Congo and Central Africa. Germany had colonies throughout Africa. So you've got you've got all these European countries that are extremely powerful and building basically carving up Africa into these different colonies. Now, a lot of these are a lot of these are part of either France or Britain have the most territory in Africa. And we'll talk more about Britain in a second. Um, but notice that in the last time period, the most powerful European nations, like when they colonized the New World, the most powerful European nations were not the British, not the French, or anything like that. They were Spain and Portugal. Notice Spain and Portugal don't really have much here. They do if you look at the map real carefully. There's Spanish Morocco up here. There's Portuguese Guinea over here, and there might be a couple others that I'm not remembering at the moment. Um, but but you have some. I guess Angola was Portuguese and Mozambique was Portuguese. Anyway, um, so you've in the de Oro and Rio Muni. Sorry, I just noticed those as well. So you have some Spanish and Portuguese colonies, but the main portions of these are going to be French, British, German, and then a huge colony in the Belgian Congo that's controlled by Belgium. So so there's the Spanish and the Portuguese are really falling off due to their reliance on the silver trade, which was going down during this time, and they didn't industrialize. Spain and Portugal didn't industrialize. So these nations used African colonies to gain diamonds, tin, gold, rubber, and they built cash crop plantations. So they used these African colonies to to do all these different things, and anyway, they used them essentially for their resources. They would get these resources and then send them back to the mother country, or use them to produce other things in the mother country or something like that. All right, the most dominant imperial power in Africa was Great Britain. Great Britain had the most powerful, or was they had the most industrialization. Their industry fueled demand for raw materials, so they wanted to get lots of raw materials, so they conquered lots of colonies. They also had the ability to conquer lots of colonies because they had these industrial weapons in such large amounts. Britain claimed colonies in Egypt and in East Africa. But then they went all over Africa as well. In 1882, Britain seized control of the Suez Canal from a French company, so they controlled this waterway. This that you see in blue, the Suez Canal is right here. It's the only way to get through the Mediterranean Sea into the Red Sea and into the Indian Ocean. Without access to that canal, you have to go all the way around Africa to get to the Indian Ocean. So control of that canal really makes Britain that much more powerful because it can control who can get through and trade there. Britain seized control of South Africa from the Dutch, and many they controlled the Dutch had control of South Africa, and then Britain seized control there. They also, as we'll talk about later, conquered many indigenous tribes there. In the process, many citizens in England dreamed of a British colony from Cape Town to Cairo, and they were extremely close. There was just like one colony they were missing in order to make this to make the British colonies kind of reach from Cape Town in South Africa to Cairo in Egypt, going across all of Africa. And then they have India too, which is huge, which we'll talk about later. All right. The most important empire builder in Africa was British businessman Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes was was the head of the De Beers Company, which created diamond mines in South Africa. So he was huge in this in this imperialism. In Africa, he gained new colonies for for Britain in South Africa, or sorry, in Southern Africa. So lots of colonies there, and and kind of brought them together into a big colony in South Africa. And then Rhodes used his wealth to build railroads and telegraph lines in Africa as well. Um, so the impact of European imperialism in Africa, you have some positives and you have some negatives. So, like we just said, Rhodes built railroads and telegraph lines. So they introduced new technologies, railroads, telegraph lines, steamboats. They bring all this new technology to Africa. However, transportation routes only connected areas that benefited European businessmen. So it's not like they're bringing these transportation routes and these methods of communication to everyone in Africa, and to help them out. No, they're using it to benefit themselves. So it's not really doing much benefit to the indigenous people. It's benefiting the Europeans who are taking control there. Europeans also brought an end to the slave trade. That's a great thing. The end of the slave trade happened around this time that imperialism is at its height. A little bit before, I guess a little bit before this imperialism is at its height. But so they didn't have slaves in they didn't have a slave trade going on anymore in Africa. But Africans were paid low wages and they were exploited. Also, in the Belgian Congo, they are they are treated horribly. If they're exploited for their labor, they're kind of forced to do labor. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, or do it fast enough or whatever, they could lose a limb. They could, somebody might cut off their arm or their leg or whatever, usually an arm, so that they can still walk around pretty well and stuff like that, and still work. And people would get killed from their terrible work conditions. And this is especially true in the Belgian Congo, as they're mainly caring about rubber plantations and things like that. Now, this is getting at the white man's burden a little bit that we talked about before. That they have this idea that white colonizers are bringing civilization to the people of Africa. So this shows just one advertisement for Pear's soap that illustrates this white man's burden sort of thing, and by name it does, which is a terrible racist advertisement that was that just shows what European people thought of Africans, and how they thought they were bringing good things to them, rather than, or at least made themselves think that they were bringing good things to them, instead of ruining their livelihood and exploiting their labor and things like that. Europeans built schools, churches, and hospitals, but Africans were taught European culture. Again, they're trying to bring civilization by bringing European culture in and not respecting the culture of the Africans that are already there. Europeans profited off Africa's raw materials and cheap African labor. And Africans were unable to rule themselves because the Europeans came in and controlled them politically. They were unable to participate in voting or learn professional skills. And in South Africa, the British segregated society called apartheid, and this remained in place for over 100 years there. Now, a couple things real quick before before we move on, or we do a new video and we move on to India. Africans rebelled against European rule, but they were defeated due to advanced European weaponry. So, so there were lots of rebellions against this European rule. The you know there and there was direct resistance against European imperialism, but they were defeated. So here's some examples. When the French had ambitions to build to build an empire in West Africa. Samora Touré resisted the French from 1883 to 1886, and again from 1891 to 1898. But he was eventually defeated in 1898, and he died soon afterwards. The British removed the king of the Asante Confederacy, in trying to establish the Gold Coast colony in West Africa, and the second in command, the Queen Mother, Ya Asantewa, began a war of independence known as the War of the Golden Stool. The War of the Golden Stool was like a symbol for for power and the responsibility of the king in the Gold Coast colony. So so that's the symbol that they use for essentially independence and keeping their independence from the British. Sorry, Ya Santewa, again, the Queen Mother, proclaimed that if the men of the kingdom would not defend the people, then the women would rise to the challenge, which was was extremely powerful and actually made the men, gave the men uh, courage to defend them as well as getting women involved in the fight as well. Also, that one again is defeated due to advanced weaponry on the European side, those industrial weapons. The Sokoto Caliphate in Nigeria was one of the largest African empires in the 1800s, but due to a civil war that happened there and European colonial armies, that led to British control in what's now Nigeria. The Zulus were an African tribe with military skill and organization that had created the powerful state of Zululand in South Africa, and the British defeated the Zulus with their technology and their resources, and took over the Zulu tribe in South Africa. It took them a while, but they were able to to defeat the Zulus there. And soon, all of South Africa was a settler colony of the British. They created a settler colony in South Africa where Europeans, British people, came in and settled in South Africa, and instead of just using their resources and things like that. All right. So the main point of this is that Africa remained under the control of European imperialists from the 1880s until the 1950s and 1960s, which we'll get into in our next, a couple units from now, actually. All right, I'm going to have a different one on India, so we're going to get started on that later.